Hello again. So I'm having to film in the shop today because the last couple of days have been extremely windy and you guys would not be able to hear a word I have to say. So in a previous gear video, I mentioned that I modified my Enlightened equipment, Revelation 20-degree quilt, to attach to a Zenbivy fast sheet. And I got a couple comments asking if I could make a video elaborating on those modifications. So if that's something you guys are interested in and would like to see, stick around. So first off, the reason I decided to go with the quilt over a traditional sleeping bag is I'm a rather large man and I have 21-inch wide shoulders, and even with the extra large sleeping bags, it's just really uncomfortable, if even possible, to find a sleeping bag my size that doesn't weigh 4.5 pounds. So with quilts being able to open in the back and being adjustable, it's just better fit for me. Plus, they have other benefits as well. They are lighter in general than sleeping bags, and they compress down really far. And one big thing for me and my gear is not necessarily weight, because I am a big guy. I can carry quite a bit of weight without any trouble, but I do like when my gear can pack down very small and keep it up close to my back. So with those benefits, there are a couple of annoyances. Not enough to be a deal breaker for me, but enough to get my mind running to see what I can do to make it work better for me. One of those annoyances is when I start to roll around at night, the quilt wants to grab a hold and roll with me, which can expose that underside that has no material whatsoever, and it loses all its thermal insulation properties. Now, the generally accepted way to combat that is to get the little sleep pad straps that Enlightened equipment sells that matches the male and female connectors on the quilt. And this will attach your quilt to the sleeping pad to keep it from shifting and rolling and falling off the sleeping pad. Now, I have used these exclusively in the past, and they have worked pretty well at keeping the quilt in place for the most part, but the big problem that happens is when I roll over onto my side and I get taller, it pulls the quilt away from the sleeping pad and creates an air gap, and that air gap creates one hell of a draft. Another problem isn't necessarily directly to do with the quilt, but because the quilts do not have the hood like a mummy style sleeping bag would, I can't fit my pillow down inside that hood and keep it in place. So my pillow just sits on my pad, slides around, likes to fall off, and that happens multiple times a night. I've tried different things like using some elastic strap to strap it down, using spare clothing to strap it down, but my pad is a 25-inch wide pad, and even though I am a large man, my spare gear like rain jacket and whatnot will not hold, or will not slide over that and be able to hold my pillow in place. So even though this isn't really a deal breaker for me still, I do know there are going to be some pretty cold nights on the PCT, and I got to looking around trying to see if I could find any solution to this at all on the internet. And what I did come across was a company called Zenbivy. If you guys don't know who they are, I'm going to leave a link in the description below to show you their setups. They can be a little bit heavy, but they do have a setup called the Light Bed, and it's pretty dang cool. So while looking into the Zenbivy setup, I realized it was going to answer all the problems that I have using a quilt. It utilizes a fitted sheet that attaches very firmly to your sleeping pad, which will solve two problems. It will keep my quilt from rolling around while I sleep, and it also has two little insulated flaps on the side that tuck your quilt in and keep the draft from coming, or keeps the quilt from lifting off the pad to keep a draft out. It also had an insulated hood at the top to kind of mimic the style of a mummy bag without actually cramming your head into it, and will allow the pillow to fit up underneath there, and it'll keep the pillow in place. Now, of course, awesome gear like this comes at an awesome price, right? It's about $500 for a Zenbivy Light Bed setup, and I already have a quilt. So I got to looking around their website and realized that they sell their fitted sheets separately. You don't have to buy the whole kit. And as I got to looking even further, and I actually stumbled upon it by accident because they were out of the insulated version that would fit on my size pad. So I just kept looking and realized that they sell a fitted half sheet that is uninsulated. Now, what this means is I'm able to get the solution to all my particular problems without adding any more than 4 ounces when you add the 3 ounces for the fast sheet and the about 1 ounce in extra materials that I had to add to my quilt to make it all work together. This uninsulated fast sheet comes in at under $60, and for that and the weight and all the problems it was going to solve, I went ahead and just bought it right away so that it didn't run out, and was going to figure out how to modify the quilt once it got here. So given that I've modified just about all of my gear in some way, shape, or form, I had all the materials I needed to do this modification, but I'll try to leave a link in the description for all the materials that you would need if you too would like to do this modification. So this particular modification was pretty straightforward. All I did was look at the Zenbivy website to see how they had their quilts attached to their fast sheets or to their fitted sheets, and just mimicked it. It was actually quite simple. All it took was some 1/2-inch webbing, some Guyline that you would have for shelter, say, and I added a couple extra clips that Zenbivy doesn't have. Essentially, all I had to do was add a loop of Guyline using the 1/2-inch webbing to the quilt in 4 different spots on either side of the quilt. These will line up with the hooks that the fast sheet has on it, and all you have to do is hook the loop right into the hook, and it's secure. It's set and ready to go. To find the proper spacing and make sure all this would mesh together really well, I set up my sleeping pad with the fast sheet on it, and then just laid the quilt down on top of it, climbed in, figured out where I wanted the quilt to sit when it was permanently affixed to the fast sheet, how far up I wanted it to be, how far back I wanted it to be, and how much I wanted it to tuck under the little flaps so that I wouldn't get any of that draft I was talking about. For my particular situation, we ended up just putting the loops 1 seam in on the quilt on either side. That was enough to keep it tucked under me when I was tucked into bed, and when I rolled around it wouldn't lift up and create that gap. And then as far as spacing front to back or top to bottom, however you look at it, all I did was lay it down on top of that fast sheet, see where the hooks were, mark it with a Sharpie on my quilt, and that's where my wife sewed the little hoops on. Once we test fitted those, after they were sewn on, it was pretty much done at that point if that's where I wanted to leave it. But because we like to play, I just kept going. I had previously modified my Enlightened equipment Revelation to where I could adjust the width of it for if it was hot or cold. I could open it up more or close it, yet keep it clipped together so that it wouldn't have as much tendency to roll. The original quilt comes with the clips that will just clip to each other, wrap fully around you, and it kind of pulls real tight. I don't always want it to be that way, so I cut those off, and then my wife and I added little adjustable clips so that I could clip it and I could keep it clipped, but I could adjust it back and forth to make it wider or smaller, depending on what my personal needs were for that night. So the quilt comes with 2 of those clips, one up close to the neck, close to the top of the quilt, and the other about 8 inches down. I replaced both of those with adjustable clips, and since I now have the fast sheet with the hook and loop set up and it won't really move around, I have a lot of room to play with those adjustable clips. So I decided to keep that top clip closest to the neck free and available to clip and unclip and adjust as much as I possibly wanted due to the temperature outside, whether I wanted to open up a little more air or close it in as tight as I possibly could around my neck. As for the one that's about 8 inches in, I added the opposite clips to either side of the inside of the Zenbivy, it's a mouthful, so that I could clip those in even further up closer to my head, and it just absolutely goes nowhere now. Between the hook and loop system that I adapted to the Zenbivy and those 2 clips that we added there, this thing is just not going anywhere. It stays exactly where I want it to, no matter how much I roll, whether my neck is pulled in tight or loose, doesn't matter, stays exactly where I want it to stay. Now with the full Zenbivy setups like the light bed, it has a full fitted sheet, which also has the hook and loop system at the bottom to hold your toe box in place. Well, this is a half sheet, so I didn't have that. So instead, my wife and I sewed 2 of the opposing clips for those old straps I talked about earlier that hold on to your sleeping pad and keep your quilt from moving around. Well, I reutilized those, cut the clips off of one, and sewed them to the side of my foot box, or actually the underside of my foot box, so then I could wrap that U shape around the bottom of my sleeping pad and then clip the foot box to it, and now the foot box and the top are going to stay perfectly still all night long. And last but not least, the head space area of this fast sheet. It is still not insulated, so it doesn't offer any insulation properties, but what it does allow me to do is to move my hands over my head at night, either whether I'm laying on my back, my side, my front, doesn't matter, I sleep with my hands above my head a lot, so I can push my hands up there and they'll stay, it'll hold them in place, kind of like I'm sleeping on my own bed, and it also holds the pillow perfectly in place. It may slide around just a little bit, but it will never fall off of my sleeping pad. So even though this is a bit of a long-winded video, it's actually a really easy modification to do, and it doesn't take all that much time. I spent more time researching the Zenbivy and trying to figure out what exactly we were going to do to make the modification than we did actually making it. So since you guys have the information of what to do to make the modification, actually doing it is fairly simple if you know somebody who can sew. If you don't, this is going to be an impossible modification. Not only is sewing a very difficult thing, not that I would know from experience, but this fabric can be a little bit weird to sew to because it is so thin. It's ultralight fabric. It can be a little bit tricky, but if you know someone who sews or you can sew, you can do this project in maybe 4 hours. And that's shooting high, assuming that it takes you a long time to get everything set up. So like I said, I am going to throw as much of the links as I can for any of the products that I used in the description below if you guys are interested in doing this modification. Also, if you have any questions on how to do it, if you are going to start doing it, if you're in the middle of it and you're like, damn it, I don't know what the heck he was talking about, just shoot me a message. I'll be happy to answer you. As if it even needs to be said, I am extremely excited to get this thing out on the PCT. I have done this exact same, I say I, my wife and I have done this exact same modification to my son's quilt. He has the same Enlightened Equipment Revelation 20-degree quilt, except it's smaller, and he also has the fast sheet smaller to fit on his smaller sleeping pad as well. But we are very excited to get this out on the PCT and try it out. I can already see it now. I'm going to get comments saying that all of this was entirely unnecessary, that I should just get over it, or I should just do this, or just do that, or just do this. But I've said it before, and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, that backpacking is one of the most personal hobbies that you can have. No one else can tell you what gear is good for you. No one else can tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Only you know what's going to make you comfortable when you're out in the backcountry. And if you're not comfortable, you will not enjoy your time out there. Some people are perfectly comfortable sleeping under a tarp on a piece of Tyvek with an accordion style sleeping mat. And if that's you, great. I'm so happy for you that you can go that minimal and be comfortable and be able to hike for months on end. But I can guarantee you that's not me, and I can guarantee you that there are a lot of people that are watching this video that that's not them as well. So if you are watching this video and you do think that you could benefit from something like this, don't let the internet tell you that you shouldn't do things like this just because it's too much or it's not necessary, because no one can tell you what's necessary for your comfort in the backcountry. So whether or not you think you can benefit from the modifications you've seen in this video, I do hope you enjoyed the video. And if this is the first time you're seeing one of my videos, or you'd just like to follow along a father and son through hike at the PCT that starts in just 8 weeks, feel free to hit the subscribe button and follow along. Until next time.